Good morning, everybody. Crappy Mondays, and welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's showbiz editor features, Jessica Boulton. Good morning, Jess.
Good morning, Susie. Lovely to see you again.
Yes, and you. Sorry we're a bit late, everybody. We've had to sort out our fringes. We've had fringe nightmares this morning. That's what Mondays are like. Now, this is the People's Paper Review, so please get into the comments, ask us your questions. We will do our best to answer them for you. Let us know what you think of what's making the headlines today. So those of you listening later on podcast are just going to have to wonder why everyone wants a change of government. So what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on Labour's plans to send what it calls super teachers, surely they're all super teachers, into schools that are rated inadequate, which are more likely to have pupils on free school meals, and therefore they need the help. It's part of the education and skills policy sort of set, which is Labour is launching this week. Hello, Grace. Now, I've got a story in the paper today, good old page 22, and because this is my show, we're going to discuss it, whether Jess likes it or not. It's about the new... It's right in your ballpark. It's really showbiz. It's about the nuclear test veterans I've written about for 20 years for the Mirror. And last week, in response to a question from the SNP's defence spokesman, Owen Thompson, the MOD admitted it had never bothered to check whether the men that were intentionally exposed to radiation during Cold War bomb tests were left infertile as a result. Now, yes, this just beggars belief, really. Infertility is something that modern radiotherapy patients, if you have cancer and you have to have radiotherapy, it's one of the things you would be warned of as a side effect. It's something that science has known since before the time of these tests. It's been known about for decades, yet the MOD just didn't think it needed to check its own servicemen who it put in harm's way.
I mean, as you know, you've been campaigning on this for 20 years, and everything around what happened to them on these operations, it just screams of injustice. And this is just the final one as well, because being able to have a family afterwards and things like that, that is something you should be at least be warned about the dangers of. It's not that there would have been much they could probably have done if they'd gone on that operation and this has happened, but at least have that conversation with people, at least be open about it afterwards. I mean, these are people that have sacrificed for the country and they've not been treated as they should be at all.
No, I mean, it's astonishing, really, because I think half of what the MOD was trying to do at the time, apart from building the bombs, was trying to say that there was no reason for anyone to be worried about whether they were going to be exposed to anything as a result. So although, if you were working in a modern nuclear power station, knowing about the risk of infertility, you would have your blood and urine regularly tested to see if there were radionuclides in there, if you were obviously ingesting something or there was some kind of damage happening. You would then be told about it straight away if there was a problem. You would be told that you could no longer work with radiation, you'd be compensated, you get a pension, you would be moved somewhere else but keep your job. These things would happen. These guys at Christmas Island, who were not dressed up like, I hate it when we use this picture. I really do. I'm going to have a word with the subs, because this is a picture of guys who were one of the Apple tests, but it was taken for propaganda. And so they all got the glasses and the hoods on, and most of the guys there were in shorts and boots. So we shouldn't really be using these pictures. But they had their blood and urine tested at Christmas Island, and we've got pages and pages of proof and evidence that these orders were given and that the bloods were taken. And they never told the guys the results. So people come home and they don't know if they're going to have birth defects. They don't know if they're going to have trouble conceiving. And when they do have trouble conceiving, there's never an explanation as to why. The doctors go, well, I don't know, because no one's done the science to look and see if it was the nuclear test that were maybe responsible. And there's, unfortunately, it will have come as no surprise, really, to one of the guys who's featured in this story today. Were he here, Alfred Trott, that's him, would know all about this. Now, Alfred told friends that what had happened to him at Opgrapple on Christmas Island was probably the reason why he never married. He was on Christmas Island in 57 and 58 for the big H-bombs, hydrogen bombs. Now, Alf died alone a couple of weeks ago in hospital, and only volunteers from his local branch of the military charity, SAFA, really rang around the hospitals to see where he'd got to, and then are now taking great care over his funeral. Now, his friends in Hackney in East London are searching for any old comrades of Alf and distant relatives, maybe, to attend his funeral and come along. It's in a couple of weeks. But Jess, this is the human cost that happened to these men. Some were infertile. Some were too terrified of birth defects to try to have children, and their marriages may have broken up as a result. And I've met several like that. Some found that women didn't want to marry them because they'd heard rumours about the test. Alf here, although he was very private, never really spoke about his personal life. He knew there was something amiss with it, but he never really knew what. He never really said what. And it's quite likely he never knew whether the radiation had caused him any particular problems. He blamed that for the reason he never married. He spent his whole life alone, apart from his little dogs who were his constant companions. And that's the impact of what's happened to 22,000 men who served their country.
It's just heartbreaking when you think of anyone in that situation where they're on their own at the end of their life, especially people that have, like I said before, they've served the country, they've done their bit for England and for Britain, and yet at the end they're kind of sort of let down, and they they haven't got that. I mean, obviously we don't know in his circumstance exactly why maybe he chose not to go down that route or didn't want to get married. But if that is the case, that he was worried about the sort of family issues and the birth defects, then obviously it's a great tragedy. And the fact that the government still not just do that small honour of giving them the medals that they promised last year eventually, it just feels like another slap in the face. It's just like, why would you not? What is the problem with honouring these people who have put themselves at risk? And for those watching that don't know what it was, I mean, it was horrendous what they went through on Christmas Island, wasn't it? This was years and years of testing the nuclear bombs and the hydrogen bombs to see what the effect was. And people were sent in without the protective gear, as you said, in boots and shorts, and in circumstances that would seem absolutely unimaginable today. Can you tell us a little bit about what exactly went on down at Christmas?
There was at least 15 years of the first bomb tests, atomic and hydrogen bombs, and also minor sort of plutonium experiments in the Australian outback. They happened off the coast of Australia, on mainland Australia, and on Christmas Island in the South Pacific. And it was the biggest tri-service operation since D-Day. And it was all kept as quiet as possible. It was when they came home, it generally got hushed up because there were lots of anti-nuclear protests and the politicians didn't really want to discuss it too openly. But the men who are there have reported their children have 10 times the normal rate of birth defects. The MOD's never studied that either. Their wives have had 3 times the normal rate of miscarriages. The MOD's never studied that either. And they've never studied, what's happened or given an explanation if it wasn't the radiation, what else it could possibly have been. That's kind of part of the trouble. But what do you think, everybody? Do you think that the infertility is worth looking at now? I mean, it is a long time ago. It's something that most of these guys, although most of them have died, there's about 1,500 of these 22,000 are still alive. Do you think they still deserve those answers? Or do you think that perhaps it's best to let sleeping dogs lie? We all know that radiation is terribly bad for you. Let's leave it there and move on, maybe. Shut up, Boniface. Stop talking about it. Let us know. Now, Alf's family, we think he was born in Bristol around 1936. His mother's maiden name was Vasey, Rose Vasey. There's not many of those in the world. His father was a William Trott. and he used to live in Hackney, and one of his favourite little dogs was called Maisie. So if you remember him from Hackney, if you are a Vasey from Bristol, if you happen to know anything that might help trace some of the relatives of Alf in his more immediate family, we think we found his birth record, but unfortunately he had no siblings. So we've got to go back a generation and then come forward again. And it's a bit sticky to try and find this in the public record. But we do need people to come along to his funeral, so try and get in touch with me, please. Part of the trouble, of course, is that the MOD can't do a study on infertility now because most of these men have died. But as you said, Jess, they are still waiting for this medal, which was promised last November. Applications weren't opened until the end of March, which is kind of mind-boggling. And there's more than 1,500 people have applied for these medals. 1,000 of them are veterans. And when you consider there may only be 1,500 alive, that is an astonishing rate for a medal. If the MOD hurries up with it, and if they can find the relatives, then Alf's family would be able to apply for one on his behalf. Had they done it a bit sooner, of course, Alf could have applied for his own, couldn't he?
That is awful. To the fact that they've had to do this campaign to get a medal, to get recognition for their service that they did there is shocking enough anyway, as you well know, because you've been leading it all this time. The fact that, it was made as a promise by Rishi in November that they would do this. I believe that there had been initial talks with Boris Johnson beforehand that had finally got the ball rolling. But then it kind of feels like Rishi came in, left it 5 months. But obviously, I mean, yes, in fact, to say it goes in the country, probably wasn't top of his list right then. But these are men who are of a certain age, like you say, and there isn't long to be able to get them that medal to show actually we do actually respect what you've done and respect what you've been through. Whether the rights and wrongs of whether there should have been more testing or not, perhaps they didn't know at the time, perhaps the knowledge wasn't there. I as you say, the science,
they knew exactly what they were doing. All the planning documents proved they knew that they were irradiating.
Right. There could be all sorts of reasons there. Whatever they are, at least acknowledge these people for their sacrifice that they've done. And my question as well is those that did have children and had the sort of birth defects. There's obviously, like you were saying, is it worth pursuing this? Well, yes, because it sort of tells us about other situations where people might have been exposed to radiation and how long this process can continue down the generations. Because what about those children with birth defects? If they then had children, what's happening then? So there's still sort of real world sort of today issues that can be learned from this, apart from the fact of literally just giving the respect to people that gave their lives to the country.
Exactly. And they didn't just protect us, they protected millions of our allies around the world as well. People in Australia know they're not going to be invaded because Britain's got nuclear weapons. It's that serious. We're not worried about Putin coming over here from Ukraine because we have nuclear weapons. And all our armed forces in every conflict since 1952 have fought a conventional war because we've got nuclear weapons. Now, Mike says, how are, it seems, Johnny Mercer, who's the Veterans Minister, and Ben Wallace, who's the Defence Secretary, at loggerheads over something that had been agreed previously? Yeah, I reported, as Mike has adequately trailed, thank you, Mike, last week, that there's a bit of a Tory split over these medals. So the Office of Veterans Affairs and Johnny Mercer was sort of leading on the medal within the Cabinet Office and making it, getting all the approvals through and pushing it. But the Ministry of Defence is the organisation which has the medal office, which is handling the applications, the commission, the design, and then the final instruction to a factory somewhere to produce it. And I heard last night that it's that bit which is delayed. It's the actual production of the medal which hasn't happened yet. It's been signed off. It's been approved. It's just sitting on somebody's desk while men like Alf, unfortunately, are dying. And I think the central issue really is because Veterans Affairs used to be within the MOD. It's now been taken out. Mercer sits in cabinet as a minister, while Ben Wallace, has lost a little bit of his, his territory, if you like. And there's a bit of a turf war going on. There's some willy waving happening. And unfortunately, that these guys are caught in the middle of it. So we'll have to see how things pan out. But obviously, the Mirror will keep reporting on it and we'll keep putting pressure on them. Now, We need to move on. And inside the paper, on pages 6 and 7 today, is the story of one woman who would like you to know what the NHS is really all about. Now, who is this, Jess, and what is she saying?
It's Anira Thomas, and I apologies if I've pronounced it wrong.
Naira.
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 I do apologize. I knew I would get it wrong, and I didn't know I was going to be the first to say it. So that's wonderful. It's obviously, it can be shortened to Nye, and she, given away by her name, is the first baby born on the NHS at 1 minute past midnight on July 5th, 1948. Now, we're obviously about to celebrate our 75th birthday or 75th anniversary of the launch of the NHS, which was pioneered by Nye Bevan, hence why she was called the female version of the name in Wales. Now, she's spoken out, talking about her passion for the NHS, but also a warning, again, of what the Tories are doing to it. And it's that age-old tale of Tory cuts, not protecting what is one of our biggest sort of national treasures as such, in theory, and it's that feeling that Tories, she says it herself, they don't care as much because they've got enough money to pay for private healthcare effectively. That's what she's feeling. Whether that's the case or not, whether it's something else or not, whether it's the ongoing bid for privatization because of, companies here and there and all these sort of things that you hear going on, that you just think the sort of sickening feeling of people that are seeing a money opportunity there. What should be a great institution. There's been over the years, and it's been every government has struggled with how to manage the NHS. But she is just wanting to say this on the birthday. Look, this is a fantastic institution, but let's protect it because it is in trouble at the moment.
Exactly. I think it's worth. We've got a slight problem with the sound. I think it's going to clear up. Hopefully, the viewers haven't had to see it too much. But one of the things that's worth pointing out, I think, is that picture of Anira is actually outside the maternity unit where she was born in 1948, which you can see, those on podcasts are going to have to take my word for this, it's gone to rack and ruin. It's been shut down. It's just been broken into by local kids for graffiti and to do sort of unofficial ghost tours and things like this. The windows are busted, the tiles have come off the roof, there's grass growing in the car park. And that's what's happened to the maternity services that were there. Now, part of the Naira says, she took her first breath in the NHS, and please God, she's hoping it will be there for her when she takes her last breath too. She calls it the jewel in Britain's crown. She says to see it being dragged down is horrendous. And she points out that when Nye Bevan set it up in 1948, there were plans for salaries for the medics to rise in line with inflation every year. But under Tory austerity policies, it was as little as, after 2010, it was as little as 1% some years, which of course was effectively a big cut. And that meant the whole thing's been hollowed out. It wasn't just reducing pay, it was reducing retention, it was reducing job satisfaction, it was reducing or increasing burnout and things like this. Now, she says that Anira Bevan would turn in his grave if he knew what had been done to it. For a lot of people, Jess, the NHS is all about money, isn't it? People talk about it as money, how much it costs, how much we have to cut those costs, how difficult it is now to get payback to where it should always have been. And it's money, 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 money. But I don't know what your last experience of the NHS was, but mine have been to do with children dashing to hospital with a funny rash and a suspected appendicitis and stuff, and suddenly getting 5-6 doctors coming through with an immense experience and for free and able to work out whether or not they need to carry out surgery on your child. That would just not be possible if there wasn't an NHS. I would have a child with suspected appendicitis and I'd be sitting there going, I don't know, because there'd be nothing I could do about it, and there's no way I could afford 5 or 6 doctors to all have a look and give a different opinion or concur in their opinions,
I think everyone in the country, I mean, obviously we're a very sort of privileged age. We were born into a time that we did have the NHS. There will be some people out there that do remember pre-NHS, obviously, because we're only coming up to the 75th. And I mean, the alternatives to it are quite terrifying from when we look abroad. I mean, everyone always sort of points a finger at America and what happens there if you can't have you don't have your healthcare through your job, or you lose your job and you lose your rights and all of that extra thing. I think all of us, the chill that would go through us if you thought, I've got to go to A&E, but I've got to have my insurance documents. I mean, we are very, very lucky to have this situation. Yes, we do all pay for it because it comes out from our national insurance, which I think sometimes people sort of go, it isn't free, but it's free at the point of delivery to us, so that we do not have to worry about that. And if we can't pay and we can't contribute to our national insurance, we're not turned away at the door of the hospital. So I mean, how many lives have been saved because of it is astounding. What's sad is the fact that people have been looking so much at budgets, and the money has gone in the wrong places. And there's a lot of money goes to the NHS, but why are they not prioritizing this above some of the other things that money gets spent on? Why are we trying to cut corners on what should be the jewel in the crown? Because at the moment, yes, it is, but people are having mixed experiences with it. And if it goes wrong for you, then obviously that's a travesty, and that shouldn't be. It's not fair on people to have that after years. We come to rely on this, and it shouldn't be I've been lucky with the NHS and I've had a great response, or I've been slightly unlucky. I had a locum who did, this because the GPs can't fill that spot.
This is the thing. This is what I would say if he was here, Jess, is that it shouldn't boil down to luck. That was what he was trying to take out of the problem of healthcare in this country. So if you're lucky to be rich, you can have healthcare. If you're unlucky enough to be poor, you cannot have healthcare. And we've got a similar thing now. If you're unlucky to live next to a hospital which doesn't have the right funding, or has got particular problems, or it's structurally failing or something, if your GPs don't want to work in the area where you happen to live, and they want to go and live somewhere else instead, then you are unlucky enough you not get the right healthcare. Now, what do you think, everybody? Do you think that the cost we pay for the NHS is too much, it needs to come down? Or do you think we need to stop talking about the cost of the NHS and start talking about perhaps the price we would pay if we don't have one? Now, we have an economy that's about £3 trillion a year in this country. How much of that would we have if there was no NHS? If mums died in childbirth at the natural rate, which is about 1 in 1,500, rather than 11 in 100,000, which is the only reason that I'm alive, my daughter's alive, and my mother's alive. If everyone who had cancer had to become a meth manufacturer, like in Breaking Bad, in order to pay their medical bills and their treatment. If when you died, all right, you would get to be at home and you'd be surrounded by whatever members of your family are still talking to you, but there would be no oxygen, no analgesia, no diagnosis, no palliative care, no mitigation for whatever it is you have to suffer at the end of your life, no breathing machines, no dialysis. How many people has the NHS saved today in the last 24 hours? And in doing that, how much tax have we saved? How many workers have we saved and preserved for the future? How many families have we saved from grief and poverty and suicide and stress and pain? No one seems to do those sums. It's all cost. The NHS costs 180 billion. It's growing every year, and people want to live longer, and they're all obese, and it's your own stupid fault. Why do we have to pay out for you? And in fact, to us, the NHS is just one big benefit. It saves Britain so much money and so much trouble, and yet we just talk about what we have to spend on it. It's like complaining about how much your mortgage is, when the fact is that it gives you a roof over your head and an investment for the future. I mean, all right, we don't all want mortgage costs, but if you have a home and you're dry and you're warm and you're safe, you're doing better than most humans in human history, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a good point, but I think our main issue here with the NHS and what she was saying is that it should be equal for everyone. You shouldn't fear what's going to happen to you when you get there. Are you going to be lucky? Are you going to have a good thing? Are you going to have a good response? Is it going to be a long wait in A&E? And most of these causes of that, of like you touched upon, have been about sort of staff retention, people not wanting to work there because the pay's not good enough, which is, fair enough. People should be getting the pay that they deserve for these long hours. It's a job very few of us would willingly be able to take on, or willingly want to take on, should we have the necessary training, because of the sort of the arduousness of it. It's amazing what people do, and the fact that they are so selfless to take on these sort of, like, the not just sort of the doctors and the nurses, but the porters and all the support people there, and people that work tireless long hours in order to help other people. It's the fact that we've got retention problems because that, we've got hiring problems. I mean, there's so many vacancies that just can't be filled because no one either doesn't want to work there, or they literally cannot afford to work there under the current system. If they've got a family, they've got a budget for it, they're being offered other money to work elsewhere. Why would they do that? We've got a query come up here. I'll read it, shall I?
Yes.
Richard Charman has said, if the level of taxation as a percentage was applied to people in relative terms to that when the NHS was created, I wonder how much we would be spending currently, assuming all costs and all funding was scaled up to reflect current costs, while stripping out excess profits being realised by private sector contractors. Yeah. That was something I was about to say about the amount of the sort of privatisation by sort of stealth that has happened over the last sort of 20, 30 years, with like certain bits being put out to private companies. As we all know, we've probably all experienced it. And we're all well aware that whenever that happens, there's some extra money being made along the way. So it's that sort of short-sighted, let's, put that out to private people to help with bringing down the target list. But then you're actually hurting the bigger picture. And it's been too many sticky plasters for too long on the NHS. It's kind of caused a bit of a mess of we've got these great resources, but people are being sort of hampered into being able to best use them to keep it as the jewel in the crown. Very interested in what that question was there on what the cost would be. Perhaps it's some sums that we should be doing. Have a look at that and see if what it would be today in today's.
It was funded the way it was supposed to be funded. I think that I'm probably right in saying that at least at some point during the NHS's history, we've had a higher tax burden, and we've spent more of our GDP on healthcare than we do now. We spend very little of our GDP on healthcare now compared to other nations, as the COVID inquiry has learned. But of course, we are expecting the NHS to do more and to help more people live with chronic long-term conditions. Labour Party is saying they're not going to end privatisation in the NHS. They would keep some part of that going because they feel it's necessary. But what do you think, everybody? Do you think the NHS is on the right track? Do you think it's when we mark its 75 years on Wednesday, is that going to be a positive thing, or is it going to be a bit of a sticky moment? How do we feel about whether the government's attacking these things, or even Labour or Tories? How are they attacking these things? Are they doing it right? We need to stop talking about the costs and start talking about the price instead. Get into the comments and let us know. But in the meantime, we have managed to find some good news in the world, and here it is. Now, Luke Mortimer, that's him there at the front of the picture, was struck down with a bacterial infection called meningococcal meningitis when he was just 7. He had to have both hands and both feet amputated, and he lost 50% of his skin. Now, he moved into a bungalow with his parents, and I hope that it'd be better for him to deal with the things that he needed to have, the adaptations and so on. And his dad, Adam, who's a builder, started to adapt it for him, but he found it's just all getting a bit much. There was too much for him to do on his own. So a team of very charitable men called Band of Builders, who all work for free, got involved, and in a very short space of time, they fitted a shower room, underfloor heating, flooring. They hope to finish the whole project this week. That's them pictured there with Luke, sorry. And it means that Luke will get his adapted home sooner, and that his dad Adam can get back to work earning money for his family, which is why you invest in things for people who need more help. Now, Jess, is this proof that if you build things properly for those who need it most in the first place, and then deliver it free at the point of need, that it will all end up eventually paying for itself?
I love this little analogy here back to the NHS again. But yes, it's very, very nice. Obviously, it's a beautiful, heartwarming story. It's a sort of a bit like DIY SOS, but off their own back. I mean, what a wonderful thing to be doing. And a lot of hard work by these people that have volunteered to do this for his little boy, for little Luke. And yes, you're right. It's his dad can get back to work. He can do things. It's a happier thing for the family, of something that the community can help do for him. Poor little boy, like having to go through that. But I mean, he looks, like he's really chuffed with what they've done for him. So I mean, that is a lovely sort of heartwarming news story. And I think one thing we should say is, because that was a lovely analogy for the NHS, is gosh, we are so grateful for it, and for all the people that work there. And the amount of times that I personally have benefited from it, people that we know have benefited from it. Everybody knows someone that's been there, and I think people just want to keep it as something that is the best it can be, without being pulled pillar to post by sort of political squabbling and point playing, and who wants that? Let's just let it be. Give them the money they need, because the people in the country want the money to go there. We'd rather that than subsidised meals down the House of Commons, okay? So if I had a choice about my tax dollar or tax pounds, and that's where it would go.
It shouldn't have to be that a group of charitable builders come along and help a little boy out and make sure that he can live safely and happily, independently to some extent, in his own home, and that he grows up that way and grows up having that positivity. And is perhaps able to work and get a job later on and all the rest of it. It's not all about money. We're not all tax generating units. Maybe he wouldn't be able to work. But the point is that he should have a happy, healthy life as he possibly can.
It's a lovely story of community coming together there.
Exactly. It's great. Well done to Band of Builders. It's a shame you had to do it, I would say, and that there should be the kind of thing that if there was a nationalised care service which would help the National Health Service a huge amount, then they might be able to provide that kind of thing.
Exactly. That's another one of the big issues, as we know. Oh, we got one here. Martin Downs helped on DIY SOS in Blackpool, and it is a great feeling helping others. Oh, I bet it is. I mean, I think loads of people really love that show. It's so heartwarming, and thank you, Martin, for taking part and doing that. Because
well done, Martin, and well done everyone for taking part today. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Jess, for helping explain it all. Well done, Nye Bevan. Well done, Anira, as well. We managed to learn how to pronounce your name by the end. And well done, Band of Builders, and to all those in Hackney who are trying to organise Alf Trott's funeral. You're all going to earn your place in heaven, as far as I'm concerned. Thanks for watching, everybody. We will see you all again on Wednesday, when it is the 75th birthday of the NHS, that glorious old lady which has been keeping us safe all this time. And I'm sure that will get mentioned on Wednesday. So join us again for another edition of the News Agenda. Till then, tatty bye.